Thanks, Daniel. I'm Julie, and to my right is Nicole. I'm not sure if she's on your right or your left. I'm going to take my snowman off and turn into a unicorn there so I can see you a bit better. Holly and I have been friends for about 5 or 6 years now, and Holly is a banker by day and a baker by night. I've spent all weekend working on that, so I'm very excited about it.
Well
So
done.
thank you, Holly. So Holly has a very special talent that she's incredibly gifted as a baker, and she makes the most beautiful cakes and cookies. And if you've ever been to one of our senior centers events where we featured her baked goods, people are clamoring to get a second one, even though we have to cut them off because everybody's always trying to steal Holly's cookies. So we're very excited to have her here today to do a live demo of her beautiful sugar cookies and the work she does on top of them. They're amazing. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how skilled she is and how great a teacher, because she's taught me in the past how to do some icing and to do a cake. So Holly, over to you, my lovely friend.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I have never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. But basically, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of my cookies, how I bake them, how I roll them out, how I cut them, and how I decorate them. So to start, whenever I roll the dough, I do it between 2 sheets of wax paper, which I have here. And ideally, if you have one of these baking mats, it's great to put on your counter first because it stops everything from sliding around. So I put 1 piece of wax paper down on the counter, and then I get my dough out of my mixer, which you probably can't see. I just made this up a few minutes ago. So I will grab a pot of dough and sort of pat it into a flat shape if I can. And then you put the other piece of wax paper on top. And the trick here is to use wooden doweling. And what I do is I put that down on either side. I don't know if you can see, but
that's better, Holly. Down, that's great.
Can't see my head now, but that's okay. We're here for the cookies, not me. You put that down on the counter, and then take your rolling pin and start rolling out the dough. And what the doweling will do when you get the dough a little flatter is your rolling pin will roll along the top of the doweling and give you a perfectly level, smooth dough at the end, because you don't really want cookies that go like this. And the doweling is a really easy way to do it. You can also buy rings that go on the end of the rolling pin, but I find that they're not as reliable and frankly a little bit too thin. They're good for doing things like fondant, but they're not so good for cookie dough, which I found out the hard way. So once you get it rolled out nice and flat, I take off the end pieces because it gets a bit too long. And then grab a cookie sheet and slide that underneath the bottom wax paper so that you can pick it right up like that, and then put it into your refrigerator to chill, because the dough needs to be relatively stiff and hard for you to be able to cut up the cookies. Otherwise, it'll just collapse on you. I just use standard metal cookie cutters. You can get them at Michael's, baking shops, etc. And once the dough, I didn't actually refrigerate any today, but once it's chilled probably for 15 to 20 minutes, you can pull it back out and just cut out your cookies. And with the leftover dough, of course, you roll it back together and do it again until you use up all of your dough. When you're baking the cookies, you're going to want to bake them. Well, I should say, I'm going to give the recipe to Julie. So if anybody wants the recipe, she can give it to you. But when you're baking them, you want to take them out as soon as they start to get even the tiniest bit brown around the edge. They frankly almost look like they're not done, but it's incredible how fast they will become overdone. So especially on things like the snowflake that have little points on the end, you'll find that they get brown really fast once it starts going.
I have to tell you, everybody, Holly's cookies, like the taste, not all beautiful cookies taste good. Holly's cookies and cakes taste delicious. So the recipe is going to be included. So we'll be able to share that with you for sure. Thanks, Holly.
You're welcome. And the recipe itself, one of the keys I find for the taste is it calls for almond extract. which I find just gives the sugar cookies that little extra boost that you don't find in others. And you can change the flavoring. If you don't like the almond flavor, you can change it up to whatever you want. This year, I'm going to do peppermint for my candy cane shapes to give it a sort of a matching theme.
Yum.
So here's what your baked cookie looks like. And I don't know if you can see on the camera, but they're just a tiny, tiny little bit brown on the edges, and that's it. So what I do to ice these cookies is I use royal icing. Royal icing is simply icing sugar, water, and meringue powder. Meringue powder you can get at Michael's or Bulk Barn. The one at Michael's is more expensive, but it's worth it. I just discovered this week that Michael's is actually running really low on stock. So I went and found meringue powder at Bulk Barn, which was cheaper, but I have discovered that it's kind of grainy. It's not really a powder, it's more of a sugar. And that's not just a good thing. You don't want any grains in this. You want it to be nice and smooth. And what the meringue powder does, it's a key ingredient. It is what makes the icing harden up at the end. So you have to have it in there. And whenever you're working with royal icing, you have to work with it relatively quickly. So never take your container and leave it open on the counter for 20 minutes because it will crust up on you almost immediately and it won't be of any use. It's also very fussy. It's easy to make because it is just the 3 ingredients. It's fussy with the water. You just have to be careful to add a little bit of water at a time because even a teaspoon of water can completely change the consistency of your icing. And what you need the icing to be is just liquidy enough that it will pour off the spoon, but just barely pouring off. If it's too thick, you won't be able to work with it. And if it's too thin, it will roll right off the edges of your cookie, which is not something you want. So that's the consistency. And I literally just add, if it's not quite thin enough, I would add 2 drops of water, stir it and check it again. 2 more drops of water. It's, as I say, it's really fussy. You'd think, oh, I can throw in a half a teaspoon. That can make it unusable, unluckily. And the tough thing about this is trying not to lick your fingers all the time because it's really, at least if you like icing, which I do. So for the actual application of the icing, I use these little icing bottles, which again, you can get at Michael's. And then they have the little tips. They're all interchangeable. So you can put whatever size tip you want on there. So I'm just using a round tip. And for the base icing, I use a relatively large opening because you want it to be able to flow out relatively nicely. Whereas you're going to use a smaller tip for doing your actual intricate decorating. So on this, I'm going to adjust the camera again so you can see what I'm doing. And I just made this one this morning. I frankly think that I made it almost too runny, but we're going to see how it goes. So you just outline the edge of the cookie. So you're getting close to the edges, but you're not right at the edges. And the snowflake I chose to do is one of the prettier cookies, I think, but it also has all these little points on it. So it's a little more time consuming. But there's lots of other things you can do like mittens and stockings that are easier to work with. So once you get the outline going, that kind of gives you a barrier, and then you flood the icing into the middle, just squeezing gently on the bottle. And it's key to get a nice easy bottle to work with, because if it's too stiff, then you're going to get sore hands relatively quickly. Again, speaking from experience, I've been crippled from making cookies if I have a big order. I had to do 140 of them last week, which had me going. So you flood the icing like that. That's what it looks like so far. And then I have, I handed in a little tool, which I forgot to get out, to fine tune the details.
Hey, Holly, how long after they come out of the oven can you put the icing on?
Good question. They have to be cooled completely.
Completely cooled.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would give them probably a couple of hours, because if your cookie is warm, again, your icing is probably going to run right off, which is not something you want. So I use this nifty little tool, which I just got last week and I love it, but you can also do this with a simple toothpick. And all I'm doing is just pulling out the ends a little to make it pointier. And you can see on the end, it's already starting to dry up on me. That's how fast this royal icing dries. So you can't even walk away for 30 seconds. It's a keep going kind of a process. But and you don't have to do this. This is just, I kind of like the little points to be pointier. So I go around and make them a little bit pointier like so. Now, once you're done this part, you can surprisingly give the cookie a really good shake. That will level out the icing really nicely for you. And if you happen to have, I don't have any in this case, but if you happen to have any air bubbles, and there might, oh yeah, there's a little one there, you can stab it and open it up so that there's no bubbles when it dries. Funny enough, while the royal icing starts to dry up really fast, for it to dry completely, I usually leave them overnight because honestly, even like after 2 or 3 hours, it will crush down on you. So overnight is the best way to go with your first layer. So I did dry a couple last night.
Holly, do you leave them uncovered, like they won't go stale on you, or do you somehow cover them?
Yeah, I don't cover them. I actually leave them out on the counter and they're fine. They don't go stale at all. In fact, I'm always amazed at how well these cookies last. They will stay fresh. I mean, obviously I don't leave them out completely. Once they're decorated, I put them in a Tupperware container, but even in the Tupperware container, they will stay fresh for 2 weeks easily. Wow. With no issues.
I know when I've been able to control myself and I put a few in the freezer, they're also really good right out of the freezer, kind of cold.
Definitely.
And to say that they freeze very well.
Yeah, for sure. So you can do them in advance of whatever event you're having and put them in the freezer. Or even if you want to do your base icing and freeze them and then do the final decorating later, either way it works well. So there's one that was iced last night and it's all nice and dry now and nice and solidified.
Holly, it's a bit, you don't see it too clearly. Could you come closer to the camera so we have a better?
Well, I see.
Oh, yeah. There's just a bit of a glare maybe or something, but.
Okay. Does that help at all?
A little bit.
A little bit. Well, let me see. I can change the lighting and see if that helps.
Oh, that's better. We can see the icing more now.
Okay, good. Yeah. And it again, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it almost has a little sparkle to it. So then I use the smaller tip, so a very tiny little tip to do the actual decorating piece. So what I'm going to do is get the icing started and just put a nice little white line from one end to the other around each of the snowflake tips. Like that. And I forgot my extra decorations. Where did I put them? Just give me a sec.
This is where we would insert a commercial usually.
I was going to say, no magic of TV.
Yes, insert a commercial, exactly.
So Holly, how long would it take you now that you've become very proficient to do a cookie from icing start to icing finish?
Depending on the intricacy, about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Again, the snowflakes are kind of detailed because, so in that case, I just did the first crisscross and then I will actually go and put little lines on every one of the little points, like so. And again, you can be as fancy or plain as you want to with these cookies. So I put my little lines on here. Oops, missed that one. And again, if you're not happy with how it's coming out, you can take the tip of your toothpick and straighten it out a little bit. And your icing when you're doing your decorating piece can be a little bit thicker. It doesn't have to be, but when you're flooding the cookie, so doing the base icing, you want it to be able to move around more. For this part, you don't really want it to move around a lot. And you can also make perfect little dots with this fine tip, like so. And then for an extra decoration, I take these little, they're called silver Dragees. They're basically just little icing balls. that you can buy at Bulk Barn or Michael's. And they're a little bit fussy, but I stick them all the way around the outside edges of the snowflake, and they stick nicely in the icing. Again, you need to do it fairly quickly because your icing will dry up. So you want to get them in there while it's still wet enough for them to stick. And there's your finished snowflake cookie.
So pretty.
Very pretty. Mhm.
Now, another option, if you're looking for something that's easy, if that's feeling too fancy for you, again, I think I forgot to get out the sugar, but give me a sec.
This commercial break is brought to you by,
The town of Oakville.
the town of Oakville, offering inclusive opportunities for people of all ages.
You could get voiceover work, Daniel.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know. Pretty good at that.
Yes, there's cookies for your mouth and cookies for your ears.
What I have here is called sanding sugar. It comes in a bag like this. Again, I'm not sure if Bulk Barn has this. I haven't looked, but they might. This one is gold. I would normally use white or silver, but gold is what I happen to have handy. So what you can do is, again, just flood your cookie with icing. I'll try and be fast here. And then you can simply dip the wet cookie into the sugar. So that, again, you might have seen these. I'm not sure. I've probably done this at some point for something that you had at the senior center.
You did, Holly, for Nancy's retirement party. We did Beautiful Stars, I believe it was, because she was
Right.
the star of the show. And we did them all in the gold and white icing sanding sugar, and they were beautiful.
And it's
And I think I was skilled enough to handle helping you with that because I could flood them and dip them without making a mess.
you were a big
I was
help.
just gonna add, Holly, the thing about your cookies too is that they are so pretty that you don't even want to eat them because they are so pretty. It's like you don't want to take that bite.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I had to laugh last week. It's a former coworker of mine ordered from me cookies for the first time. And when she was in the process of placing the order, she looked at my website and said, well, they look great. She said, but they're not edible, right? They look inedible. And I said, no, I trust me, I wouldn't waste my time baking something that I couldn't actually eat. What would be the point? So again, I would usually do white icing instead of blue, but this is what I had on hand. So you simply spread out your sugar on a plate and then take your wet cookie and dip it into it. And for any spots on the ends that maybe don't get dipped in, you can just pick up a spoon and shake the sugar over top like that. And then give it a little shake to get any excess off. And poof, you have a decorated cookie that's all sparkly and pretty and ready to go without having to fuss with all of these little white lines and so on. It's maybe not as pretty, but they're still really nice. And it's a simple way to do it. So that's basically my cookie demo. Any other questions?
How long can you keep the icing sugar in the containers?
Oh, the royal icing, that's a very good question. It will last for up to 2 weeks. The only thing is that it will start to separate a little bit. So if you leave it for a day or two, you're going to notice that there's a slight separation at the bottom. So you just want to give it a good stir when you go to use it again. And what I usually do is I mix up a whole batch of white and then I divide it up into a few of these containers so that I can add my food coloring. Well, that was something else I was going to mention. When you do use coloring, I use the gel colors. Not the super liquidy food coloring. Normally, I think most of us tend to get food coloring. I'm just looking to see where I have a bottle. I usually used to get my food coloring at the grocery store, but it's almost like water. So what I get is these little gels. You can get some at Michael's. You can get stuff like these at McCall's baking shop, and they're much thicker. You hardly need any for the color, but it doesn't, the runny stuff will change the consistency of your icing and it doesn't give you the nice vibrant colors, where this will give you the good colors. So you can divide up into all your different colors that you need depending on what you're making. Like for snowmen, for example, I need about 6 colors. So I don't tend to get them all done at once. So for sure you can leave it overnight, or for, as I say, it'll last for up to 2 weeks, and just give it a good whip. And you don't need to refrigerate it or anything. It'll be fine just on the counter.
Now, Holly, I know each cookie is a different size because based on your cutter, but on average, what does a batch yield for cookies?
On average, I get about 50 cookies out of a batch.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. So you can easily, I mean, if that's too many for you, you can split the batch in half. Or again, only decorate half and freeze the other half until later, or whatever works.
You can freeze the dough?
No, I would make the cookies, like cut them out and bake them, and then freeze them.
Okay. And then freeze the cookie. Okay.
Probably could freeze the dough, but I haven't tried that, so I can't say for sure.
Okay. Awesome. Anybody have any questions for the lovely Holly? Julie, go ahead.
Yeah. Where did you get the gold sugar?
That I actually got at a store called Golda's, which unfortunately has gone out of business, but I'm pretty sure you can get it. There's a place called Flour Confections. I don't know. Again, I don't know if Bulk Barn has it. Flour Confections is in Pickering, but they have online ordering available. And I haven't looked for it at Michael's, but they might have it too. It's one of those things. I find baking supplies are harder and harder to get. McCall's Baker's Warehouse also has the sanding sugar, and it's in Mississauga.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I had mentioned in the comments, if anyone wanted the recipe, Julie, I think you had shared the recipe with me in advance. So I can certainly share images of that if folks wanted to print. You would just have to send me a private message in the chat function, and then I can send that your way.
Awesome, Daniel. I was just going to say, everybody, if you hang on here a second, what I can do is I'm going to pull up some of Holly's other samples. Can everybody see my screen here?
Mm-hmm.
So this is some of Holly's work, and that's why I would say her colleague asked if they were edible. Like, look at these baby cookies. Those look like decorations. I mean, that's just, it's amazing, Holly. I'm going to try and find some of the Christmas ones here, because you can see a few more of her Christmas decor ones, which are pretty amazing. So there's the snowman that she was talking about. Aren't they adorable? And here is an assortment that she does. So there's a little bit maybe of a better shot of the snowflakes that you can see there.
I love that the gingerbread men are bitten.
This one over here has lost his
I was
head.
gonna say, poor guys.
That might have been Gabriella's choice, was it?
Maybe.
Holly's daughter is also into baking, so she's a very big help in the kitchen, I know. So there is the elf on the shelf guarding the cookies, and there's another great shot of the snowflake and the holly and the mittens. And I think, Holly, maybe you're so good at this with your name, it just is synonymous with the season, right? Ooh,
I guess.
There's Nancy's stars. So you can see the yellow sanding sugar. And then I'll let Nicole talk about these ones. Do you recognize those ones, Nicole?
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to see the image here. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I had contacted Holly about making some cookies for my daughter's wedding shower, and those were beautiful as well. Those were really, they went over really well. Nobody wanted to eat them. Like, they were just so pretty. Yeah.
In that case,
those were really nice.
The decoration in that case was done with fondant. Those were not done with the royal icing, because I'm not good enough to write out the initials with by hand. So, but that's the good thing about these cookies, is you can actually do that if you want. Roll out fondant, cut out things, and stick them on top of the royal icing. Ah, yes, Easter.
There's some Easter ones.
So I just have a question. And the baby, and the baby cookies, was that fondant that had like the little bear, and is that fondant or icing?
Some of the decorations were fondant in that case, and so they all had royal icing on the base, and then some of the decorations were fondant, and some of it was royal icing. Like the bows, for example, were all done with fondant.
Right. I'll see.
Holly,
Oh, okay. Well, they
could you,
look beautiful.
Holly, could you add a hole and hang them on the tree?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. When you're rolling out your dough, you would cut out your cookie shape and then take something, you'd have to get a small circular cutter and cut out a little hole before you bake them. And you'd want the hole to be relatively big because the cookies do rise a little bit. So if you made the hole too small, it might actually bake closed. But if you cut a hole big enough.
Would a straw work?
Yeah, I think a straw would work.
Okay.
My wife
Awesome.
uses a chopstick. She bakes cookies and then puts them on the
Oh.
tree. Yeah,
There you go.
chopstick works.
Oh, nice.
Now, I don't know how long they would last on my tree. I'm sure I would have a stomach ache by the end of the evening. Well, I'll have one of those and one of those and one of those, which is also part of the reason that I freeze them when I sneak over to Holly's and take a little couple. And the best part is if you get to go to Holly's when she's decorating, what do you call them? The bits or the ends or whatever, or when she's cake making, all the cuts.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yes. Like when I make a cake, I usually cut off the top to level it out. So there's the top pieces. With the cookies, there's always a variety of incidents. They break or they didn't bake quite right. Or so those are the extras that we get to munch on while we're decorating.
Before COVID, I used to just make like a little, I had to stop at Holly's and I would look around the corner to see if there's cake or cookies on the counter. She's a good girl to know, everybody. So I'm not sure if anybody has any other questions or anything else for Holly or Nicole or I. No? Okay. Well, this recording will be, oh, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
What are you doing next week?
Oh,
I'm hoping to do some for my own. I'm a little behind this year.
Holly often works till, the wee hours of the morning decorating because she's very dedicated to her craft, certainly. But for our talk, Julie, next week, we have another special guest. Nancy Beto will be here. So if anybody wants to chat with Nancy next week, we're going to have what we're calling a little fireside chat. And nobody, bye Joyce, thanks for joining us. Nobody would mind if you had a little adult beverage and we could all chat with an adult beverage.
You're supposed to tell me to turn off the recording.
Oh, turn off the recording, Daniel. We're all grown-ups here, aren't we? It's okay. You're just having eggnog. That's what I meant by grown-up beverage, everybody. And yes, Karen, I will absolutely send you an email with the recipe.
I'm already on it.
You're on it? Okay. And Margaret and Julie, would you like the recipe emailed to you?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I have both of your emails, so
Yeah.
I will.
I'd like it too, please.
Nicole, you're a given. I was just going to CC you on the email. Well, Holly, I wanted to say thank you so much for spending time with us today and sneaking away from work. Hopefully nobody from the bank catches you on YouTube, or we can just say you're on lunch.
Absolutely. This is my lunch break.
You're on your lunch.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you had a great time learning how to decorate with Holly.
Thank you, everyone.
It was very good.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you
Bye.
next week.
Holly.
Bye.
Thanks, Holly. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Thanks, Holly.
Bye.